A lot of people have a lot of different opinions on Fallout 4. Some loved it, some hated it, some just played it and enjoyed the game, instead of letting their opinions be dictated to them by people they don't know over the internet. But one niche complaint that can't be overlooked, at least for someone in my position, is one of lore retcons. Now, ordinarily, these can be overlooked to a certain extent. The Fallout series has many entries, and there is a lot going on, but some changes just go in the face of everything that was previously established to such an extent that it just can't be allowed to stand. It is some of these retcons that we should be taking a look at today. Just a reminder, to those of you who aren't getting notifications about my videos, or they aren't turning up in your subscriber feed, remember to enable notifications and click the bell icon. Now, let's take a gander. The way we are going to approach this is as follows. We will talk about the retcon, or at least what the community considers a retcon, what it is and what its possible implications are. We shall then look at whether or not it is an actual retcon, in that whether or not there is a true explanation for why the information we have in Fallout 4 contradicts that which we may have found in the rest of the series. We shall be taking a look at 3 separate topics: power armor, cats, and, last but not least, jet. Power armor is one of the most recognizable concepts from the Fallout series, appearing on almost every one of the series game covers, and being an endgame level item, or at least it was until Fallout 4. I can go over power armor in its entirety in another video, if you would like, but for now, a brief summary will suffice. Its full name is Power Combat Infantry Armor, and it was designed for combat by the US just before the Great War. Apart from the advantage of providing a variety of levels of protection, the suits themselves offered the user increased strength, allowing them to carry much larger armaments with them into battle. Essentially, it allowed your average infantry troop to become a walking tank just by stepping into one, ready to mow down every cunt that got in their way. It's here that we must address the first issue with the armor. Why can the sole survivor wear and operate power armor at the beginning of the game? It's meant to be a highly complex piece of machinery that takes training to use correctly, except it isn't and it doesn't. Power armor training is in of itself a retcon. It was added in Fallout 3 and Fallout New Vegas due to the ability to encounter Brotherhood of Steel members much earlier in the game, or at least come across the armor. As a result, Bethesda added in, and Obsidian kept, the concept of needing training. In Fallout 1 and 2, this was just simply not the case, as coming across the armor early game wasn't really all that likely, so it couldn't result in giving the player an unfair advantage. In Fallout 4, that advantage was significantly less pronounced, and the scarcity, at least initially, of power cores, which we will get to, and better parts, kept it this way, so allowing one to access it at the beginning wasn't game-breaking. Another possibility to consider is the capabilities of the sole survivor themselves. Now, this gets a little more complicated with Nora, the female version of the sole survivor. However, for Nate, the male version, we have in-game proof he was in the army. Aboard the USS Constitution, you can find his pre-war records, telling us he was in the 108th Infantry Regiment. This makes it far more likely that, lore-wise, he had some past experience with power armor, and perhaps even direct training in its use. Unfortunately, there is no in-game explanation for Nora, the female sole survivor. So overall, I don't consider them knowing how to use it a retcon, as the training in of itself was a retcon, and there is some in-game evidence to suggest that they would know how to operate the armor. The next issue is with the power cores associated with the armor itself. In the original Fallout, all suits were powered with a microfusion reactor, later described as a fusion core, that would last several hundred years with modest use. Except this is not our experience of use at all. Most fusion cores drain within a day or less of use. Now, from a gameplay perspective, it makes sense. They needed to limit the access to the armor, so that training didn't need to be implemented. Also, it gave people an early game ability to carry more shit. However, we are looking at lore retcons here, and it makes no sense. If these cores were meant to last hundreds of years, even with use, then why did they burn out so quickly for us? An argument could be made that after all this time they've degraded, but we see no evidence of this. More to the point, other fusion-based technology is still functioning fine even after centuries of extended use. Another point to remember is that some, or even most cores, have been in either inert armor, so unused for centuries, or locked away in containers, the same again. As such, they should have suffered little in the way of degradation, that one could argue the cores found in generators that have been running for centuries could have possibly have undergone. Taking this a step further, when we first encounter the armor with President Garvey, he comments that it's probably been out of power for 100 years, meaning the cores barely last more than 100 years, given that 4 occurs 210 years after the bombs dropped. Given that the cores are meant to last that long without use, or at least it's implied they do, then without they should be able to last much longer. The last argument that could be made is that, somehow, everyone before Fallout 4 had newly charged fusion cores, and it's only now becoming a problem. I consider this to be a lazy and bullshit explanation. I believe this is a proper retcon, as the need for these cores was absent from all previous games. As such, apart from gameplay, this serves no purpose as a meaningful addition to the lore. The next issue with power armor comes in the form of 2 very specific types, T60 power armor and the X01 power armor. Now the T60 is a little less complicated, so I will tackle it first. Essentially, this armor did not exist in any Fallout game before Fallout 4. Before this, the most advanced pre-war armor in circulation was the T51B, and the post-war was the Enclave armor. Yet, somehow, we have another widely circulated pre-war model. Now I know what you're going to say. Maybe it was experimental and just really rare. Yeah, okay, yeah, fair enough. Except no, because from the words of the Fallout 4 loading screen, it wasn't. It was used extensively by the US Army after Anchorage in the months leading up to the war, and on the day the bombs themselves fell. This armor would have and should have been sitting around with corpses inside after Armageddon. This is the issue. If this armor seen such widespread use, if it was so common that many people had access to it pre-war, then why do we only see it in Fallout 4? It could be it was only deployed in Boston, except this seems to be in contradiction with the information that Fallout 4 itself tells us. Though at this point, that shouldn't really be surprising to you. Not to mention the fact that the Brotherhood of Steel also had this armor when they show up, which means it couldn't only be available in Boston. This means that this suit of power armor was fired into the game for the sake of it, as it is indeed a retcon. Now, the next suit of power armor is controversial. How you interpret its existence really comes down to a few things. So the X01 is an experimental suit of power armor. It can be found in various places in Fallout 4 randomly, and we know that at least one suit of it was given to the Nuka-Cola Corporation in the form of the Quantum X01 power armor. This was done on behalf of Project Cobalt, which we may cover one day. It is the strongest class of armor that is available to us, and, due to its design, a constant source of consternation in the community in regards to its existence and its implications. But let's see if they're even warranted. One of the biggest issues people have with its existence in Fallout 4 is that it is quite clearly related to the armor that the Enclave have distributed among their ranks, with the greatest similarity coming from the appearance of the helmet. That confusion would arise here is understandable. However, this is not Enclave power armor. It's described as the X01, a pre-war armor. The Enclave armor began development sometime around 2198, and was completed around 20 years after. At this time, it was always taken as their own creation, which makes sense given a 20-year timeline. However, Fallout 4 changed things up. The X01 itself was in fact a pre-war model, meant to improve upon previous design iterations, with a completely new philosophy. The Fallout 4 loading screen refers to it as a specially engineered model that was employed by the remnants of the US military after the Great War, and is improved over pre-war models. This appears to immediately establish it as post-war, and the group in question that was a remnant of the US military is, of course, the Enclave. However, note that this only says it was used post-war, not that it was created post-war. It is here that I must turn to Fallout 76. Unfortunately, an entry in the White Springs Congressional Bunker makes reference to an experimental suit that the Joint Chiefs were asking about. However, at the time of the bombs dropping, the suit never entered mass production, and seems to have still required some work. This suit is almost certainly the X01. Specially engineered likely just means mass produced. Fallout Shelter makes reference to the suits being used to protect the President, but beyond that, there is no indication that they ever seen widespread adoption. The only other use case that we know of was in Project Cobalt. It was utilized as a proof of concept for some of Project Cobalt's technology, specifically quantum. But apart from these niche use cases, it wasn't widely adopted before nuclear Armageddon fucked everything up. We do know that the Enclave managed to save copies of the prototype, and, sometime later, after 20 years of research, worked out the majority of the kinks. It then began deployment in the kind of numbers that the suit may have seen pre-war, had everything not gone to shit. So given all of this, is the existence of the X-01 a retcon? Well, I mean, yes and no. No actual reference to an experimental model after the T-51B was ever made pre-Fallout 4. But this just means we didn't have all the information. It makes sense that new models would be designed, and it makes sense that the Enclave would use them as a base for further designs. So the existence of the X-01 could just be seen as a fleshing out of the lore, as opposed to a complete retcon like the T-60. The only issue is why no one else ever found them. This could be chalked up to their rarity, but why weren't there any in DC if they were used to guard the President? Why doesn't the Brotherhood have them, given their obsession with pre-war technology? To be honest, this is a hard one to decide. It comes very close to an addition to the lore, but the frequency of the armor and its absence from any previous games kind of moves it into the territory of a retcon. So now with power armor out of the way, let's talk cats. Now many of you will probably not know this, but cats have been largely absent from the Fallout universe. Think about it. We have so many mutated creatures post-war, and some even remained unchanged and survived, and to a certain extent, thrived. The same could not be said for cats, however. Before Fallout 4, they were widely believed to be either extremely rare or outright extinct. The first Fallout game states that, due to a shortage of food, and cats being easy prey, they were hunted to the point that the majority of people consider them extinct. Even Mr. House tells the courier outright the cats are in fact extinct. This at least indicates that there are none in the Mojave, and in really most places in the Fallout universe, this was also the case. Oddly enough, most people still know what they are, which suggests either the knowledge has persisted, or everyone over-exaggerated their scarcity. Fallout 4 changed this. Cats are everywhere, just strolling about like they own the place. It's nice to know that war isn't the only thing that never fucking changes. But why is their population in the Commonwealth so large? I mean, it's a little more built up than most places, but it still underwent centuries of shit. The same shit that generally resulted in cats being killed off. Well, there are two possible explanations to this retcon. The first is that, well, they're all synths. They would make pretty good spies for the Institute. Only thing is, we can get meat from them, so this seems unlikely. The other explanation then is the vaults. Vaults in the Commonwealth could have had some cat population present in them, and when they opened, they reintroduced them to the wastes. Since then, being cats, they have reproduced like crazy, and somehow avoided getting killed by, well, everything. The issue with this explanation is that we have no evidence of what vaults they came from. Not only that, I don't understand how they'd even survive. Most of the things the cats would have eaten pre-war are either gone, or are bigger than them now. So unless they're eating each other, being fed by someone else, or just plain immortal, I'm not sure how they even could have survived after leaving the vaults. If they were in fact here the whole time, I fail to see how they wouldn't have mutated or adapted, as all their prey did. To this end, I'm treating this as a retcon. They were meant to be so rare people thought they were extinct. It doesn't make much sense for them to exist as they do now. Lastly, and perhaps the most well-known retcon for Fallout 4, Jet. Jet is a methamphetamine that was invented by Myron, first appearing in Fallout 2, lending some credibility to his claims that he is the original creator. From there, it spread across the wastes due to its ease of manufacture and its addictive nature. However, in Fallout 4, an entry in a Vault-Tec terminal makes references to shipping some of it to Vault 95. Now, why it would be shipped there makes sense. As we learned when we covered it, Vault 95 was a vault to house addicts. Therefore, given its addictive nature, it makes sense why it would be required there. However, the issue is, it shouldn't have existed pre-war at all. If Myron did indeed create Jet after the bombs hit, then how could it be referenced or available before his time? Well, there may actually be an explanation. Given how easy it was to manufacture, Myron may have just rediscovered it, as opposed to being the original creator. It's also possible that he stumbled across a terminal or a manual describing its recipe, allowing him to accurately reproduce it. This means that a lot of jet in circulation could be both pre- and post-war, and explains why it was referenced before the war and why it can be found in sealed locations. It could also be that the terminal is referencing something with a similar effect and the same name, and it's just a coincidence that they are both called by it. However, none of this explains why there is no jet in the first Fallout. If it was a pre-war drug, and it is common on both coasts, then it should have been present in some capacity in the first game. The fact that it wasn't is only explained if it was created after the first Fallout, which means it shouldn't have existed at all pre-war, and as such can't have been referenced in a pre-war terminal entry. Therefore, jet being a pre-war drug is indeed a retcon, due to a lack of explanation for its absence in the original Fallout. So there we have it, 3 topics that are subject to retcons of varying degrees, some more so than others. Some of them do seem to have explanations to a certain extent, and as such may not be retcons so much as topics we need more information about. Some of them are just poorly done, like the power cores, T60 and jet. Some, like the X01, are plausible, if a little shaky. Cats are a problematic one, as them actually being extinct seems to be more of a regional opinion, as opposed to a confirmed fact in the games. Though, to be honest, even if they weren't extinct, it's odd how they survived at all. But even with these changes, it's hard to argue they spoil the whole game, as, in my opinion, for a game of this scale, it's still incredibly well crafted. Hello everyone, I thought I'd try a different kind of Fallout video this time around. If you'd like to see more of this kind of analysis, leave a comment on what you'd like. Probably better actually if you put it on Twitter, it's easier to actually get to the comments or actually reply to you than on YouTube. And many of you are complaining, as I mentioned at the start, that you aren't getting notifications when I release videos. So to get the checklist done, you need to be subscribed, enable notifications, and hit the bell icon. Beyond that, if they still don't come through, I've got no explanation. And at that point, it might be best just to use my Twitter account for updates, as apart from, actual video releases, I don't really post that much, so you're not going to get spammed or anything. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope to see you in the next one. And until then, goodbye.